All right, you ready to do it?
Yeah.
All right, Joshua, here we go. So five, four, three, two, and one. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Thrilled to have back Joshua Cameron. Joshua, welcome back.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you holding space for me again.
Awesome. So Joshua is a combat veteran who specializes in helping those who are caught in a life of chronic pain, whether that be emotional or physical. Helps them heal through the healing the spirit and following Taoist principles of inviting flow where there are blocks in our energy. He spent over 10 years in the medical field from combat medic in the Army to pediatric medical research and data analysis at the University of Utah. Joshua, welcome back. So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are
Yeah, so
currently.
that's a great question. Born and raised in Salt Lake. At 19, I ended up joining the Army and, was abroad for, let's see, I was in the Army for about 4 years. During that time, I went to Kosovo, Macedonia, Bulgaria, and that was, 8 days after September 11th. So it was a weird time. And then in January of 2003 is when we geared up to go to Kuwait and Iraq. And then I spent 7 years in Indiana after that, and then came back to Salt Lake area.
Okay. So for those people who maybe didn't catch the previous episode or the initial episode, um, bring us up to speed here. How did all this start for you? Give us the thumbnail sketch, and then we'll dive in.
Uh, I'll start as far as just my healing practice and kind of how all that
Yeah.
works. Sure. Well, trying to keep that down to thumbnail sketch. There was an explosion of chaos in my world. Some of that was I started a new job January of 2020 because what could go wrong with that? The job was, hey, we have no idea what we're doing. And this was the data analysis. We have no idea what we're doing. So we need somebody to come in and show us what we're doing wrong because clearly we don't know what we're doing. And I was using new software programs, so I had to learn all that. And then by March, the University of Utah has never had any sort of, remote, work. We had to figure that out. I didn't know any of the different practitioners I was working with or their administrative managers, so I had to figure that out. I had to make all these different relationships. Well, at the same time, I was also separating from my wife, and I moved into I bought a condo that was like an old style apartment, and I had somebody who was living below me who I can't say for 100% a surety that he was a tweaker, but he acted very much like a tweaker, blasting his music at all times of the day, shaking my floor literally at 80 decibels. Couldn't get away from it for months and months and months. Nobody would help me out. And, as a combat veteran, I'm sure you can imagine just how vulgar that is. So I've got, this chaos that's threatening my mental health. I've got the chaos of trying to, sustain my livelihood, this new job, and then, COVID happening. I came from research. And any credible researcher would say, well, I don't know whether my research is safe and effective. Let's look at the data. And then we seem to
Mhm.
have bureaucrats, in the news that were saying something different, but all the researchers were towing the line with what the bureaucrats were saying. Like, well, wait a minute, something doesn't sit right. So then I had this weird, like, well, what do I do? Right? I was at this impasse. I have to, find this new way of life. And Jordan Peterson came into my life, and he secularized the Bible for me. Well, mainly Genesis. And I was like, I've never heard biblical wisdom put in this way. So with that said, is there room for God, this God, right? That he's talking about, is there room for God in my life? And that changed everything. I started having mentors coming into my life that then started giving me glimpses of, okay, well, this is the next step to take. Okay, this is the next step to take. Oh, well, here's a path to walk. And as you walk the path, okay, well, here's the next step to take. And that's, in a nutshell, how it happened. It's just extreme chaos that shook the cracked foundation that I was standing upon because I would,
Mhm.
had a foundation built of bitter political, angst, and that had to crumble so I could become a new person.
So for those who aren't familiar, Jordan Peterson is a what popular speaker, thought leader. I think he's a
Yeah, Canadian
podcast.
psychologist, though they did take away his license because he didn't really like the idea of compelled speech, and because he wasn't nice on Twitter, which seems a little silly, but it is what it is. But
Is it fair
yes,
to say he's somewhat controversial?
I think it's fair to say, though, I don't fully understand why he's controversial. I,
Right.
I
Well,
think,
I think
yeah,
I mean, I've seen him, I've listened to him speak several
mhm,
times. I've caught him on certain podcasts. He, he's very direct. He's very blunt.
yes,
He, I think it is fair to say he's polarizing, but I'm not exactly sure why. I'm not knowledgeable enough about him to say why.
Yeah, well, and I think that is part of what drew me to him. I didn't necessarily, these weren't like, cognizing ideas. Like I didn't have this intellectual, debate of, oh, I should go and follow Jordan Peterson. There was just something that he was talking about that was drawing my soul, and there was some sort of
Mhm,
truth. I think that's a big issue that we have, right? One of my favorite series of movies is The Matrix, and you could argue that The Matrix is, the greatest, documentary ever created. Now, it's very Hollywoodized, but when you think about it, we were born into an environment where our name is chosen for us, and our name is the most important thing in our lives. In fact, many studies show it's the most beautiful sound that we can ever hear is our name, but we never
mhm,
chose it. Our religion's not chosen, or we don't choose our religion; it's chosen for us. We don't choose our geographic area or culture. It's chosen for us. And even things like media, if you watch the media that tells you how to think, well, we in 1996 we went from 50 giant media companies down to six. So now just the funnel of where we can get information, has been so narrowed, and so it's such a hard ability to expand our view with such a narrow pipeline. And with the explosion of things like, YouTube allows people like Jordan Peterson, whether you love him or hate him, to break through. And
mhm.
then that expansion also has a way of, letting go of things that no longer serve us.
So you've had this background in the military. You've had certain
Mhm,
experiences there that have impacted you. You talked about what happened a few years ago, living in that apartment
mhm.
with the environment there, hearing Jordan Peterson. How did that impact? What did you do
Yeah, great
with
question.
that?
So there were a few things that Jordan Peterson, mentioned to me that really stuck with me. One was, if people aren't interesting to you, you're not listening hard enough. I was like, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. I've been discounting people like, oh, this person doesn't have anything of interest to say. Well, they're just idiots. And so I stopped and say, wait a minute, have I just been an a-hole this whole time? I've just been an a-hole this whole time. Holy cow. And so like I felt good that I no longer had to hold on to this. It was a revealing of my shadow that I felt great that I could actually, one, let that go, and two, incorporate that. And then two, I felt called. I had a vision of a podium. By that vision, I knew I had to go speak at an LDS church. I had no idea how I was supposed to do that. Am I just supposed to go to the bishop and say, "Hey, bro, got a vision from heaven. You got to move aside. It's time for me to speak." Well, I figured out that the first Sunday of every month, it's what they call fast and testimonial meeting, where anybody, does not matter whether you're a member or not, anybody in the congregation can go up and, for 5 minutes, share their testimony. And so I started doing that. And he talked about the best thing that we can do is create our highest ideal of goodness of which we can conceive, and make ourselves worthy of it by becoming it
Who
and
said
embodying
this?
it. And so as I'm in the congregation listening to people, I could again start making fun of them because you might hear four, five, six, seven people in a single day say, brothers and sisters, I know in my heart that Joseph Smith is the one true prophet of God. And I know in my heart that the Book of Mormon is one true word of God. And I know this to be true because it's my personal testimonial, and somebody else will say some approximation of the exact same thing over and over. But instead of judging them, I said, oh, this is their highest ideal of goodness. So what's mine? And so then I started taking my highest ideal of goodness from a low resolution into a high resolution. And by the third time I shared my testimony, I had it. It was all around Gandalf, which definitely is no surprise. Gandalf, is written by Tolkien to effectively be Jesus of Middle Earth. He's very secular in nature. He's not interested in judging people. He's interested in results. He definitely has a faith component, but he also has an action component. Where, Frodo is like, hey, somebody should have put, Gollum out of his misery. He immediately says, well, hey, I'm pretty sure that Gollum still has something to play. And, who are we? Who are we to, condemn judgment? There's enough killing going on. Like, okay, I like this. There's something beautiful about this, and it felt like it encapsulated the heart and soul of the Jesus that I heard about. So it gave me a clear line to Jesus while also being much more safe because growing up again in the Matrix. Well, I found that I was judging Jesus horizontally. Well, what are the people saying, and what are the people doing that espouse that they follow Jesus? But if you're going to follow God or Jesus or something transcendental, it's got to be vertical, right? Because they transcend the human condition. And we're all flawed. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have our problems. And if we're going to judge something perfect or
Mhm.
divine by a flawed human, well, then that's our own thinking. And so when we see these flaws and we see these things that we don't like, listening to Jordan Peterson really helped me understand, like, oh, this is just my shadow, right? Why did I get so caught up in politics? Well, because that was my shadow. Why was I so anti-Trump? Because there was some part of authoritarianism within me that I could not deal with. It's like, oh, that's why I got triggered so much, because I was spending so much time alienating this. And this is something that Ken Wilber talks about a lot as well, if you're familiar with that great
Mhm.
philosopher.
Mhm. So, what have you done with this? I mean, my understanding is that you're working with people.
Hmm.
You said you wrote a book. How are
Hmm.
you kind of manifesting this? How are you taking action on this?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I appreciate it. So on July 21st here in Salt Lake City, actually going to be hosting a live event. A wonderful gentleman, Drew Vernick, who is shamanically trained in sound bathing using crystal bowls and wooden flutes. He and I are going to host a ceremony for people to show up, and they get to experience there's going to be a cacao ceremony to help. Cacao is traditionally meant as a heart opener, and there's this quote that I love that my great master Ed Stracher, who taught me how to heal, said that the the heart has no questions and the mind has no answers. So when you open the heart, right, you may not necessarily know exactly what to do with, right? Like you asked in the question, what am I doing? What are the actions I'm taking? You may not necessarily know what to do yet with the answers that you have, but in the heart are where the answers are. And then with the harmonic vibrations of the sound bath, get people in an equilibrium state and then take them through a guided meditation that I'm going to put on. My book that I wrote was really a lot about my tripping and falling and landing on my face, and what do I do then? And what do I do then? I spent a lot of time taking psychedelic drugs. I talk about kind of my journey with there, because that was my hijacking into a transcendental state of mind, or transcendental state of being, before I fully understood that I could really just close my eyes and meditate and get there as well. Now it may not necessarily be as fun, right? Because drugs, love, like it or not, there's a certain amount of fun involved there. But yeah, really the point of the book was like, look, no matter what sort of gifts you have, we all are having this human experience.
Mhm.
And we're never going to be at this place where, like, yes, I finally I made it. And really just want to say, hey, if you have these great gifts that can benefit the world, it's okay to be flawed. It's okay to be human, right? It's okay to be to be different, and not to put ourselves in a place where we need to be on a pedestal. Because the second we do that, well, then we are alienating ourselves from the community and from the human connection, right? Because if we're elevating ourselves, by we are inversely dehumanizing and de-elevating, right, others. And also, if we're elevating ourselves, that's also a dehumanization, right? Because we're lifting up our own status. And so that's really what the book was about. And as far as like the types of people that or the conditions that I've worked with, there's torn tendons, right? Help regrow tendons, which apparently medicine will say it's impossible, probably because we don't have a pill to take to be able to help with that. Um, Helping pain from cervical dystonia, spinal stenosis. Um, Severe arthritis, also even, depression. I mainly focus on physical, chronic pain,
Mhm.
but I found that I've had people come to me, and it gave me a good opportunity to be like, okay, well, let me work with this person. I'm pretty sure, as I understand, that the soul being the governing agent of the mind and body, you heal the soul, it's going to heal the mind and body. Well, let me take my hypothesis and let me move it forward and see what the results are. Well, I've worked with people like in New Zealand who are, experiencing such severe depression that it actually has a somatic effect They start getting, itchy welts all over their body that can't help but just scratch, leaving
All right.
these
So hold
nasty.
on a second. Let me interrupt.
Yep.
So you're talking about your work as a healer,
Hmm.
and this comes from where? Were you just born a healer? Did you go to school? Did you study under some shaman? Where does this come from?
Great question. So, the first part, where was I born with it? Well, you could say yes, because as Jesus said, right, even the least amongst you can do, um, as great and greater things, right? So, it really just comes down to, are you listening to the truth within your heart, right? Anybody who is healed, one, Jesus didn't heal anyone who didn't ask for it, but two, he didn't go, huzzah, look at me, I'm the man, I healed you. He said, by your faith you were healed. And so, as in this chaotic time, so Jordan Peterson then led me to Sadhguru. And, so here's this Indian mystic. I never would have thought I'd be listening to an Indian mystic. And so this Indian mystic, and really listening to him, then introduced me to Peter Sage. Okay, so instead of just Indian mysticism, so then how do I get it even more practical? Well, and then here's Peter Sage, who back in like 2003 was like the youngest, Tony Robbins instructor, and he is big on this transcendental journey of helping people find their mission in life, and then also what to do about that.
Hmm.
And through Peter is how I met Ed Stracher, and by working with Ed, I mean, when he took us through, and we met for, I think the training ended up being about 3 months overall, but when we first started working together, the first day, right? He was taking us through, within like an hour and a half. He actually brought in live participants to show us that we could do what he says that we can do. And I had a lady who had, she said that she had libido issues. I was in no strange place because she didn't have her camera on. And so I couldn't even see her respond. So I had to elicit information, just asking, talking to her afterwards. But I took her through like a 5-minute micro meditation. And she told me that she literally felt where her ovaries were, that she could actually feel something flicking it, as if the energy there, was stagnant and not flowing, and something was almost like kicking it, trying to get it to flow. I was like, well, holy crap, that's incredible. And whether it's like the placebo effect, well, who cares, right? Like Andrew Weil says, right? Well, placebo effect, well, why aren't we chasing the placebo effect? Because obviously there's something real there. Obviously our brain is able to take something and alchemize it into something real. So why aren't we chasing that? And yeah, so he convinced me, Ed Stracher convinced me, just the reality of this. And then when you take a step back and you understand that our eyes can only perceive less than 1/2 of 1% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So what's out there, right? Cosmically, we're blind. And so for us to walk around and say, well, seeing is believing, there's a certain absurdity to that.
Hmm. So, you said you made a reference to the Bible saying that, well, the least among us can
Mhm.
do the greatest. I'm not so, I think the least among us oftentimes don't believe that they can do that,
Sure.
right? But obviously, you have this belief and this sense and this feeling that you can heal. Was that there, for example, when you were in the military?
Oh, no, not at all. That's such a great question, though. I was an angry teenager with a chip on my shoulder that was so big I couldn't see past it. And so it took a long time for me to really get over that. And working with Ed really helped me dissolve a lot of that. I mean, Jordan Peterson really started putting big chunks in that foundation, of that Tower of Babel of like, this hatred is, all there is, and this angst and this anger at the world is all there is. And Ed really helped me dissolve that. Peter really helped me, give me practical
Now his name
examples.
is Ed Stracher.
Yeah, Strachar.
How did he help you do that?
Just by one, teaching me, and then two, giving me the certainty, right? Jesus said, by your faith, you are healed. Okay, well, how does the placebo effect work? The placebo effect doesn't work if I don't believe and I just take a sugar pill. The placebo effect works because you've got somebody who is in a position of authority that says, hey, if you take this very well may actually save your life,
Right.
or it may heal you, or whatever, whatever they tell you, right? Because it certainly isn't, what I do certainly isn't practicing medicine, but they take it and then their mind makes it real. And so what I do is I effectively, heal the soul, which sounds weird, And I guide people to then accept that, right? They still have to do their part, because if they don't have the faith that they aren't actually accepting the healing, they're not going to heal. Right? I can't kick down their door and put that their arm in some sort of arm bar and start punching the kidneys and telling them you're going to heal whether you like it or not, right? It's they have to do their part and they have to want it, and they also have to petition and ask. Because if they don't want it, well, they're not going to heal, right? Because there's nothing in it for them. They don't they and even if they don't believe, if they have that true desire that they want, well, then I can give them the certainty, right? And that's what happened with the apostles. Whether you believe the Bible the way it's written or not, which I certainly don't, I think it's a wonderful allegory of metaphors. But being around somebody, the guru who has that much certainty, can absolutely change your life, and that's really what he did.
So in terms of the healing that you are doing, what specifically are you doing?
Well, exactly that, right? And so the thing is words are clumsy, right? There's things that, Alan Watts talks about, because if we talk about and we break down the way that a flower works and breaks it down to its anatomy, how it changes the sunlight into sugars, it's like, oh my God, this is so complex. Well, no, it isn't. It's only complex when we really start thinking about it. And so effectively what I do is I get people out of their head, right? Lao Tzu, the great master who wrote the Tao Te Ching, is quoted saying that when the mind is still, the universe surrenders it, surrenders itself. And or rather the universe surrenders to the still mind. And so my job is to get your mind still, and as I'm taking you down deep into a meditation, I can tune in and be like, hey, Guy, your mind's on 3%, which isn't bad, but zero is better. Allow your mind to go more still than it ever has before, so you don't block yourself. And then I guide you to also open your heart, sometimes through smiling, sometimes through jokes. Ed is really good at naughty jokes, and just because that when you're smiling and you're laughing, your mind's not on, your mind's not active, because you're just in the
Mhm.
moment and you're present. And so there's a lot of just, helping people get out of their head, so that way they actually get in their heart. And the heart is the gateway to the soul. And, this is my map of the world. And the map isn't necessarily the territory. And, how does this all work? Well, in some ways it's above my pay grade, but, in the, clumsy way in which words operate, this is about the best approximation that I can give.
So people come to you for what type of healing? What are you calling this type of healing that you're doing or offering? Soul
So
healing? What?
say that last part again.
I said, what type of healing are you offering people or providing for people?
Well, I heal their soul, and then their body heals. Their body heals itself, and
Okay.
by accepting that. And as far as I know, um, there is no there is no physical obstacle. Like there's no like, well, I have this disease that can't be healed. And many cultures, especially Eastern cultures, really believe in reincarnation. And this is where things can get a little weird. And, I certainly live in the weird, so I don't mind. But let's just say that, in reincarnation, you were a
More
general at one point in
weird.
time. Right. Exactly. More weird. So let's say that one day, in, former life, you were a general. And if you were a general, you went and you raised an entire city, right? You were like a Roman, you went and salted the earth as well. Nothing could grow. Well, karma is action. So this is the action you took. So what action are you going to take to redeem that? Well, that's what the next life is for. And so maybe in order to redeem that action, you were born in a place where you were a victim of that exact circumstance. Or maybe you were a Spartan in a former life where there's somebody who has some sort of physical deformity and you just leave them out to die, right? To just succumb to the elements. Well, then maybe in a next life, you were then born with this ravaged body that is paralyzed, why or childhood cancer, whatever that is. Again, why does this happen above my pay grade? But
Mhm.
having this map of the world helps me kind of come to terms with that.
Well, when
And
you say, I'm kind of getting lost here. What do you mean
okay,
your map of the world? What does that mean?
It just means that the map is not the territory. So if I have an atlas and I'm trying to get from here to Wyoming, I'm going to be able to follow certain roads. But those roads aren't going to be able to tell me if there's a pothole. Those roads aren't going to be able to tell me if there's roadkill there. Those roads aren't going to tell me what other cars are on the road, what other obstacles I'm going to run into. But it gives me a general idea of kind of the layout. And so the way that I'm explaining is effectively a map in the way in which I look at how this all works out. I can't explain to you what sort of obstacles that you're going to run into
Hmm.
on your journey, right? Because that's I just don't have that right to tell you how your life is going to play out. But I can give you a meaningful map based upon what I've seen. And that does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So if you're healing people's souls,
Hmm.
that means that someone's soul needs healing.
Sure.
And what does that mean when someone's soul needs healing?
Well, it's been drained by something, right? So, we get our energy from things outside of our bodies, right? Exogenous, right? We eat things and then we incorporate whatever we eat into we break it down for energy. Well, the matrix, while the fourth matrix wasn't the best, representation of the overall, matrix storyline, they did have a very interesting part where the matrix is now run by the emotions that are given off by Neo and Trinity. And so, why does the news constantly try to put us into a state of fear, into a state of panic, right? Why did, it's come out that a lot of controversy, again, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but controversies have come up in order to make people very afraid. Well, again, if we can only see less than one half of 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum, perhaps there's some other being that simply feeds off the energy that we are giving. And if we're giving out that energy freely, because we have, we have the free will to watch the news, we have the free will to allow ourselves to be scared, we have the free will to allow ourselves to be angry. Well, then they're effectively feeding off this, and as they're feeding off this, well, it's draining the soul. Now, where you might say, well, if the soul is drained, well, then how do you get it back? Well, because you have the sovereign right to your soul's energy and you can bring it right back.
So when
It's
you
just a matter
say
of having the right goal.
soul, we're not talking about one's, or are we talking about one's body or one's mind or one's essence? I'm getting a little lost here. If someone comes to you and says they feel depressed,
Mhm.
are you in are you looking at that and meeting that person and saying, okay, there's something going on with one's soul?
Again, a great question. So first, I tune in to find out, like, hey, are there any sort of affirmities, right, with the soul, right? Is there something there that's perhaps draining them? So first, I have to identify that. I'm not I don't work as a neuroscientist, so I'm not there to diagnose what's going on with the brain. What I know is that, inside our bodies, right, we were built from a single cell, and so that same intelligence is still there.
Hmm.
But since we have effectively allowed ourselves and programmed ourselves to then say, oh, well, I need to give authority over to XYZ, whether that be a doctor, whether that be a pill, whether that be religious practice. Well, then I no longer have the ability to heal myself. I no longer have the ability to prevent myself from being angry, whatever that is. So we're freely giving our energy over. We're getting our soul is effectively getting fed off of, and then I help people uh, reclaim that soul's energy. And by walking through the guided meditation, then I help them by accept that. And so they still have to do their acceptance part. And then
Hmm.
that's what, by seeing and feeling their healing, right? Jesus said, by your faith, you are healed. And so I help them find the faith through my own certainty and getting out of their head. Because the head's going to say, hey, is this really working? Well, that's going to block you. The heart knows what's true and what's not. So I really help them get in that heart space. I don't know. Again, I don't know if this fully answers your questions because words are very clumsy in this
Right,
space.
right.
But this, again, is the map of the world I've created.
Okay. All right. Look, Joshua, how do people reach you if they want to get in touch with you and learn more about your meditations you're offering, the events you're putting on? What's the best way?
Yeah, yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So right now, I've really limited the amount of people that I'm working with. So if you really do want to reach out to me, I'm happy to accept an email. You can send it to 86joshuaim@gmail.com.
Okay.
And then I'll be happy to converse with you. It's actually an idea that I got from one of the great masters that trained, Ed, Raymond Grace. People just email him, say, oh, it's actually a really simple way because I have a few different irons in the fire. And then that way it's a great way for me just to, interact and figure out, hey, am I the right person to, because I'm certainly not here to try to fix anyone. I'm here to help people who are, truly and earnestly seeking.
Okay. Once again, that's 86, the number 8 and 6
Yep. Yep. Number
at,
86, joshuaim@gmail.com.
okay, at Gmail. And I'll have that listed here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Joshua, as always, very informative, very inspiring. And I got to say, it took me outside of my certainly knowledge base, but you kind of mentioned a lot of interesting people, which we'll also have linked up here. Appreciate you being on. Thank you so
Hey, I
much.
appreciate you holding the space and allowing me to speak. And I hope I didn't do too much of a flyby for people.
All right, man. Take care.
Thanks.